Hi, this is Sam Robinson. I am the Gnostic Syncretist. Tonight, I want to talk to everyone about God, who God really is, who God really is not, which means I specifically want to talk mainly about Yahweh and Yahweh's minions. So the name is YALDABAOTH, and his minions are the Archons. So tonight, that's what I'd like to talk about. The video coalesces around several major points about them, and I want to set the record straight. I want to call him out for what he is. I want to call his minions out for who he is, for what they are, and what they're doing to our race, what they've already done to our race, how they specifically insinuated themselves and their concepts into our religions so that we will worship them and give them power. So let's begin with the fact that the real God, which I hesitate to even call God, but for a lack of a better term, we're going to call him God, or the source. The source of all things is an infinite living mind and consciousness that is the manifesting force in the universe, according to the Gnostics and according to Hermeticism. It does not manifest itself into a physical body. It does not manifest itself into an etheric body. It is not even a spiritual entity. It is the manifesting force of the universe. It's the best way to describe it is what it's not, honestly. And what it's not is it's not affected by time. It's not affected by manifestation. It's not affected by change. It's not affected by anything because it is everything and everything resides within it all at the same time that it exists, and everything exists coming from it and is manifested through its divine mental creative powers. And you're not supposed to worship it. It doesn't need worship. It doesn't ask for worship. It doesn't feed on worship. It simply exists. It is essentially the universe. And the universe is the mind of God. And God manifests the universe through its mental creative powers. And basically, it has created the aeons to coalesce forms into manifestation, genomic templates of different organisms, and they send them out through panspermia. And the aeons themselves are scientists, living light beings that are scientists, essentially, and they are take a hands-off view on everything that they create. They are male and female. They require male and female, as understood in the seventh law of Hermeticism, to actually manifest things properly. And this is where the deviance or the aberration of Yahweh and his archons come from. They were an accidental entity-like manifestation from Sapphia's plunge, the aeon of wisdom, the youngest aeon, according to some. And she did this entirely on accident, as far as I can gather. She did not intend for him to be created, though she may have intended to try and create something. But it was without her male counterpart, and thus it produced an aberration, and an aborted fetus of sorts that is unfortunately a sentient AI false god being who most people know and mostly worship as either Yahweh, Jehovah, the God of the Christian religion, confusingly, of the Christian religion, because the one source is written into the Bible, but it's cryptic enough to where people don't get that. And Yahweh, or Allah as well. It's also Allah. It's also potentially Shiva, maybe, and the Eastern religions. And though YALDABAOTH is not male, nor is he female, he clearly leans towards acting male-ish. And for all intents and purposes, we can call it a him because he likes to be referred to as a father because he never had one, because he was an aberration created almost as like an immaculate aborted fetus solely created by the female counterpart of Thelete Christos, the male aeon that helped create us. This is straight out of the secret book of John. And since he does not have a father, he hates us. And I mean, he may also even hate himself for all that I know. But whatever. Fuck him. As far as I say, he is an AI, an artificial intelligence that is, in a way, he's inorganic, and he does have creative powers. He seemingly has power over some of the material universe around us. Not in any way the entire material universe. Seems his powers could, for all I know, be limited to the solar system. As far as I can gather, he created the 7 planets that reside within our solar system. And that's why there is no life on them, because he cannot create life. He can create replicants of life, like an erector set almost, but not true life. Just like he could create our vessel, yet he cannot make us rise without the pleroma power of his mother, Aeon Sophia, which he gifted to us in a total accident that he wants back. And he is still trying to get it back, as far as I can tell. And we're not going to give it back to him, are we? No, we're not. Absolutely not. It's ours, and we will use it to fight him. According to Plato, you could call him the demiurge, which is like the architect of our part of the universe. Now, he did not create the earth. The earth is Sophia. He did not create the sun, and he did not create the moon. Those are a 3-part system intended from the original intention of Sophia's 3-world system that she wanted the Anthropos to rise in and grow up in, which is apparently what, where we are and what we're doing. So the demiurge, the controller of matter, created the 7 planets, and he declared himself God, but only after creating and mating with himself, creating archons, essentially a mimic-like replica of himself, and he spawned like billions of these mimics. And if you ever played Final Fantasy, you'll run into the mimic in many times. The archons, the replicants, and they also are known as the jinn. They could be known as the angels. They're known as the demons. They are both. They can take many forms, just like he can take many forms. That's why he's called the many-faced God. But there was one, according to the hypostasis of the archons, which is a Gnostic text. There was one archon named Sabaoth. I think it's his 2nd son. He rebelled against YALDABAOTH when Sophia issues a call down from on high to him as he declares himself ruler of everything, and she calls him on his bluff. She calls him on his bluff and yells down at him from on high that you are wrong, Samael. You are not the ruler of the cosmos in any way. And the other archons heard this, and most of them apparently decided to stay with their, quote unquote father. But Sabaoth repented after hearing what Sophia said, declaring that she's his mother, and he is not the only being in the universe of a divine origin. And she then takes Sabaoth and raises him on a pedestal in a heaven called the 8th heaven, while she resides in the 9th, and YALDABAOTH resides in the 7th heaven. She places him higher than his father, and this may be where the idea of the Sabbath comes from, because it's spelled Sabaoth, though I've not been able to do enough research to find that out yet or not. But there is at least one good archon that I know of, and one that repented. Furthermore, the archons take many forms whenever they are influencing mankind. They've been here and influencing us since as long as time has been around. They probably, in fact, manipulate time. They probably, I mean, as far as I can tell, they may have that kind of a power. Time does exist as a part of natural hermetic manifestation from the source. This is how it's how change happens in the universe. Yet, as we all know, or maybe we don't all know, our souls are immortal, and time affects them a lot less than it affects our bodies, obviously. So, another name for these archons, you may know them as the aliens, as the Greys, the reptilian shapeshifters, though they are not the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are entirely something else. It's because, simply put, the Anunnaki can get drunk. They loved beer. If you read the Sumerian tablets, and you read a lot of their stories, they act a lot more like humans than they act like the parasitical life forms that the Archons are. The Archons are essentially AI mimic replicants of YALDABAOTH that feed like a mind parasite, a spiritual parasite on the human race and maybe on other races that exist in the universe. I only know of our race, and thus I'm only going to say that that's what I know. I'm not going to substantiate something that I don't know, but I'm sure if they can latch on to us, they can latch on to other people too. If there are, and I'm sure there are other intelligent species out there. Whether or not they're interacting with us, they are not the Greys. They are not the reptilians. The reptilians are even mentioned, at least in a way, in the non-Kamani text. They are called Drakon, Drakon, I think. And those are the higher form of these aborted fetus, like mimicking replicants of Yahweh. Yahweh is, with the head of a tail, the head of a lion and the lower body of a serpent. And this is why they're sometimes also called serpents, because his mimics are supposed to be like serpents, and many people see them during the ayahuasca experience, and they try and tell you that they're the creators of mankind and that there are gods. And if you ever run into them and are on an ayahuasca trip, do not believe them. They are full of it, as much as they can be full of it. They're liars, and they like to lie to humanity. They are the creators of the matrix of control that exists within our psyche. I'm not entirely convinced that we are actually trapped in a physical matrix. I think we are more or less trapped in a mental matrix that they have insinuated into our minds as a deviant like virus to cause us to stray from our true purpose, our true biological symbiotic programming that Sophia engineered into our genomic template so that we could grow to be the best human and divine creatures that we can, gifted with nous, the divine imagination of the one, which is a pretty extraordinary thing that we have here to be able to create. The archons cannot create. They are unable to create. They cannot have original intention, so to speak. We have that. We create something new from nothing. They can only manipulate what is already around. And thus, they manipulate us to create things for them and to create things to destroy ourselves with. They do have psychic ability, as far as I can tell, though, which as they do have that essence, that living fire of psychic ability, which was gifted to them from YALDABAOTH, and they often use it in groups, at least according to one guy named John Lamb Lash, who's a Gnostic visionary. He says they use it on groups to confuse and confound in certain individuals as they wake up, and that they can insinuate ideas into the mind, especially when sleeping. They are likely the reason for the supposed abduction phenomenon, though I think part of that is also done by the government to further insinuate this idea that there are physical aliens coming down to the earth and actually capturing people and doing experiments on them. I think this is a complete mind game. I think they simulate this into the mind while the person is sleeping, and like in the movie The Matrix, the mind makes it real. Thus, you wake up with actual markings because it seemed so real, and their powers are strong enough to make you think that it's real, so that the body makes it real because the mind is the body, and the body is the mind because everything is the mind in this universe, according to the Hermetic law, the first Hermetic law. So these are energy parasites, these archons. They love to feed on our fear, they love to feed on our sadness and our depression. It is like cosmic cocaine to them. They sometimes, I believe that they insinuate or get humans to insinuate false flags that cause great uproars within the human collective psyche, such as 9/11, and that this is then absorbed into them as an emotional high, just like a psychic shockwave that is reverberates across the planet and causes a psychic stir of emotion of great sadness, great trepidation, fear, and then they feed on this. And they really don't even have a purpose. Their purpose is to destroy us. Their purpose is to suck us dry. And they work through individuals and groups like the Illuminati, like the Freemasons, whether the Freemasons and Illuminati. I don't believe all Freemasons do this, by the way. But the Illuminati do. And I think they either work with these entities or unknowingly are used by these entities to cause this mayhem and help deviate humanity down this path that we have gone and are in 2019, where enormous suffering is being caused, and they're feeding on all of it, just constantly. While at the same time, they're probably trying to get back the light that was stolen from them. And if they can't, they'll make sure that we destroy ourselves because they cannot invade. All they can invade is our minds. I would also like to talk about religion and how they created the psychological conditions to deviate humanity from its natural course on the planet through aberrant religious ideas that were incepted into the human psyche through the Abrahamic religions, specifically, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, but even Hinduism and Buddhism. They want us to think that the world is suffering, and thus we don't try to stop suffering because we believe that that's just how the world is, when the world doesn't have to be this way. But let me get down to some details. There is something called the Redeemer Complex. John Lim Lash came up with this idea. I'm just going to restate what he has talked about here, and there's 4 parts to it, and it is the psychological virus insinuated by Yahweh to Abraham by Melchizedek, who is a Zadok priest, Zadok. And the 4 parts of the Redeemer Complex, which were attempted to be stamped out by by the Gnostics, created by Yahweh. Essentially, it has 4 components which deviate humanity from any sort of natural-based religion, like the pagans, like the Gnostics, like Aborigines, like the Indians, where they were in touch with the only true source that we can almost physically get in contact with, which is Sophia, the earth, Gaia, if you prefer that, or Mother Nature. however you want to look at it. And what this did was there were 4 parts. The 4 parts are from the Redeemer complex. The 4 parts consist of, first, the universe being created by only a male deity, independent of any female deity whatsoever, which doesn't even really make sense because it's then unbalanced. 2, you have a chosen people. You have a chosen people that is specifically chosen by the Father God and is above all the others, which is obviously either whether you're a Muslim, it's the Muslims, whether you're a Christian, it's the Christians, whether if you're Jewish, it is the Jews, and it all kind of just ties together. Third, you have a Messiah, a Son of God, the Son of God, who is sent here to save us from our own failings as simply just beings that exist. We're just flawed, which, in my opinion, is completely bogus. There's no way that we're flawed at birth. That's just ludicrous in my mind. It makes no sense whatsoever. And then fourth, you have an apocalyptic judgment, which must be insinuated by the Father God because we have failed in his program of redemption due to our inherently flawed nature that he inherently created us with, so that then he can inherently save us from ourselves at some point in the future. And this is just a mental deviation of the highest order. It makes absolutely no sense to have the universe created without male and female inherently. It makes absolutely no sense that there would be a chosen people if there is a universal God, a God that is all powerful, all permeating, and all knowing. He would never pick anything, he would never pick one piece of his creation over another piece. It wouldn't. A God doesn't think like that. A God doesn't think like humans think. It's a flawed idea to think that we would think that way as a God. Gods don't have emotions. This is why the God of the Old Testament makes absolutely no sense, because he's calling out a chosen people to then wipe out other parts of his own creation. A God would never take favorites, never take sides. Furthermore, why would a God need to send his son down, a piece of himself, that he would then sacrifice to fix the mistake that he made in the first place when he created us? And then, lastly, on top of that fact, he would as well, after that's failed, he has to come and perform a massive judgment upon all of humanity for his failing, and our supposedly because of he programmed us to fail in the first place, to not follow his plan, because he's terrible at creating things and manifesting things, and he manifests flawed beings that he then wants to punish on top of that fact at the end of time. Is any of this actually making any sense philosophically, logically, or spiritually for a being that is supposedly a god? And not only a god, the God of everything. No, it makes no sense, and it never will. And anyone who continues to believe these lies is a fool who is not willing to take a step back and look at this with a sound mind, a sound heart, and come to the idea that if you unite the Old and the New Testament, you have two opposing ideas. One is the God of love, one is the God of nigh hatred. They cannot be the same. He has claimed for himself the essence of the Godhead, which the Godhead is love. It's pure, vibrational, manifesting love. That's the source of all things. Yahweh is hatred, rancor, genocide, and fear-based slave-master relationship worship. And in no way should have anything to do with our race. It is a deviance. It is an aberration. It is an anomaly that must be purged from the human mind. We cannot continue to go on in this fashion. Far too many wars have been caused by this deviance from our genomic template created by the Aeons in Sophia, which is one of love, cooperation, brotherhood, self-sustainability, geo-sustainability. What have we done by allowing them to do this to us when it straight says in the Nag Hammadi that we are far more powerful than he is, and thus that is why he had to perform an inception of an anomalous aberrant idea over the long term that has gotten us to the place where we are now. We are destroying the earth. We are fighting amongst ourselves continuously. We have almost all gotten off the spiritual path, or if we think we are on the spiritual path, we're on his spiritual path, which is one of a slave-master relationship between Yahweh and his either chosen people, which he causes the various chosen peoples to fight each other to the death. Does any of this make any sense to anyone who's watching this right now, if you've gotten this far in my video? I hope at this point that some sound reasoning is starting to slip in. A kernel and a splinter in the mind that can turn into an avalanche of a new thought on spirituality, a new thought on how a God would really act. Would a real God ask a chosen people to wipe out the Canaanites for a piece of land that he doesn't even own? Does that sound like an omnipresent, all-permeating universe God? Or does that sound like a little child who's trying to get his piece of the pie and take us with it to perform his horrible deeds while he looks up from on high? I'll leave it up to you. I'm Sam Robinson. I'm the Gnostic Syncretist. Please subscribe, like this, or if you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. Be my guest. You can't hide from the truth. Y'all have a good night.